The well-established A to G scale is a brand device which successfully integrates emotional desires and rational rewards. It provides information helping to determine how environmentally friendly a product is and delivers benefits to the individual customer, allowing them to save energy running costs and enhancing resale value on major products, such as on cars or houses. According to the first wave of our Environmental Choices survey, 72% of English people recognize the A to G scale, and 47% of English people indicated that this scale had had an impact on their behavior. This impact was higher amongst those most concerned about climate change, climate citizens at 59%, compared to those least concerned, skeptics and uninvolved, at 32%. In comparison, a recent UK marketing device is carbon labeling, a system designed to reassure consumers, that the manufacturer is measuring and committed to reducing the carbon footprint of a product. It's an impressive achievement to be able to provide this information, enabling people to make low-carbon consumer choices. But how much do such choices directly benefit the individual? Could more be done to encourage adoption, maybe with prize draws, social recognition, or some form of green credits? By late 2008, our Environmental Choices survey showed that just 9% of English people recognized the carbon labeling logo, and only 2% indicated that it had affected their behavior, so mostly climate citizens, although we should recognize that carbon labeling is still quite new. This top tip is regarding existing brand equity. It is about how we all build relationships and attachments with various things, and how we can be reluctant to give them up. People do not necessarily adopt new brands or technologies because they are better. People have fond associations and feelings for some high-carbon concepts or brands, and these will need to be overcome. Let's look at this example of coal. It would be difficult to think of a more climate-threatening high-carbon product than coal. Yet, for all that, coal doesn't seem that bad to many people. Here is an advert for a cargo company which transports coal, and how coal makes a house into a home. Indeed, it brings value to life. And the positive brand associations of coal are shown here from a restaurant in Wimbledon. As part of the survey, we tested people's attachment to coal. We presented them with the word via a 2-second tachoscopic test, much like this. Having shown the word for 2 seconds, we asked them for their immediate thoughts. They were told that there was no right or wrong response. We literally wanted their top-of-mind thoughts. We then represented the word coal and asked people to select up to 3 emotions they felt it evoked in them. As part of our analysis, we coded and netted all of the top-of-mind associations into various categories, as shown here. The predominant association among the English was one of warmth, with about half of respondents expressing associations linked to the concept of warmth. Only a small proportion, about 3%, associated coal with climate change or fossil fuels. It's worth mentioning that the results were somewhat different in each of Canada, England, and the USA. It seems that our cultural heritage makes a big difference in how we think about coal. We also went through every emotion registered about coal and again coded and netted them into groups. We then coupled all of the emotions feelings to the top-of-mind associations, as can be seen here. This slide shows the most important mentioned feelings expressed for each association. And as can be seen here, the predominant emotions evoked in relation to coal are positive: warm glow, calm, and nostalgia. Remarkably, even within those who associated coal with climate change, 16% still felt it evoked a warm glow. And amongst the group who associated with top-of-mind groupings bad, black, death, just under a quarter felt it evokes warm glow, and a fifth nostalgia. Clearly, there are strong emotional ties with coal, as there may be with other high-carbon brands. Companies selling low-carbon products need to recognize this in their marketing strategies to increase their chances of success. And this is why we produced this advert. We took a bit of artistic license, as I think that is actually wood in the grate, but it does give a sense of how cozy a coal fire can be. So how could low-carbon alternatives challenge this emotional connection? What associations and feelings would they like to communicate for their low-carbon brand? This tip is about being wary not to assume that the low-carbon consumer is the same for each industry sector. We are taking aim at the assumption that the same detailed segmentation model about the green consumer will apply to all markets. Our first challenge is that there are different demographics according to the industry sector. The target low-carbon consumer for laundry products would be amongst older women. For micro-energy products, it would be amongst middle-aged men with children at home. And for telepresence or video conferencing technology, it would be amongst high-income, younger business travelers. So if you're looking to reduce emissions from business flying, you are really targeting a small number of people. For long-trip business flights of 4 or more hours in length, the 3% of English people who are heavy business flyers, that is, take 3 or more such flights in a year, we calculate are responsible for around 75% of airline seats in this category. Each of these demographics would have different values, passions, and circumstances. The second challenge is to do with behavior change. To get your target consumer to respond to your low-carbon proposition, you need to know both their attitude towards climate change and also whether there is an incentive or not to make the desired behavior change. So if you want climate citizens to stop using oil-fired boilers, you need to know whether they already have and love an Aga. If you want climate citizens to start using public transport, you need to know if it would be very difficult for them to do so. And if you want climate citizens to support increased taxes on flying, you need to know whether or not they fly. And just to follow up the point made in the previous slide, we know that from our environmental choices monitor, just 3% of English people are responsible for 75% of long-haul business flying. These are the people who take 3 or more business flights of over 4 hours per year. Indeed, here is some data to illustrate my last point. English people who are fairly equally split between those who fly and those who do not. We just define flyers as those who fly once a year or more. So we asked respondents to say whether they like the idea of increased taxes on flying. So approval for extra flying taxes is well correlated with both concern about climate change and whether someone personally flies or not. So if you're a climate citizen non-flyer in England, you'd be pretty likely to support increased taxes on flying. This demonstrates that a powerful segmentation approach often combines attitudes towards climate change and behavior and contextual incentives within a particular sector. Here is a way of combining the attitudes towards climate change and support for a specific low-carbon proposition. In the top right-hand corner are those people who are climate citizens and little incentive not to switch to the low-carbon proposition. They're going to be strong supporters. In the bottom left-hand corner are those most likely to resist the most, since they care little about climate change and are strongly incentivized to keep doing what they are doing. A particularly interesting group are those climate citizens who have a strong incentive not to switch to the low-carbon solution. These people are in a conflicted, ambivalent position, likely to be in a state of unmet need for an alternative solution. For example, this could be climate citizens who fly, as seen on the previous slide, a ripe target market for telepresence companies and offset providers. Our final tip is about thinking carefully about the ideas used to communicate your low-carbon brand. Metaphors are a powerful way of doing this, and they should be targeted at particular groups. A metaphor defined as an implied analogy between two objects or ideas offers tremendous opportunities for succinct and powerful communication. The recent hacking of climate scientists' emails shows how metaphors are used in the battle of public opinion over climate change. Skeptical opinion quickly termed the emails as ClimateGate, using the gate as in Watergate, which has become a metaphor for scandal deception. Some liken global warming to the internet.com bubble or of Ponzi schemes, situations where people en masse are duped in contrast. In contrast, Gordon Brown talked about these hacked mails using a metaphor from the classical world, saying that we must not be distracted by flat earth skeptics. So often low-carbon brands are using images of nature, such as polar bears, within their advertising. But are metaphors to do with nature going to be right for your low-carbon brand? Within the environmental choices study, we tested 6 environmental ideas to see how powerful they were. Overall, a beautiful nature idea was one of 3 ideas which were rated well. 58% thought it was the best or best equal idea. So we applied the shade analysis against the data from all 3 countries, with whether the idea was best equal best or not being a dependent variable. This analysis showed that the appeal of this idea varied greatly according to whether someone was concerned about climate change or not. So climate citizens, especially female climate citizens, are particularly likely to think this idea is powerful, while skeptics and uninvolved, especially from the USA, are particularly unlikely to think this. We also found that climate citizens had different passions from other groups. This chart shows the differences between Canadian climate citizens and skeptics and uninvolved. So climate citizens are more likely to be passionate about nature watching than skeptics and uninvolved. Indeed, across all countries and amongst different age and gender groups, there is a pattern that climate citizens are more likely to be interested in pastimes involving nature, reflection, or that are active, whereas skeptics are more interested in passive pastimes or motorsports. And much like the coal fire advert shown earlier, we have created an advert that addresses these points. We're suggesting that the polar bear image is not going to work well if you want to engage people other than those who are already concerned about climate change. There are other advertising concepts which get more widespread support. So in designing communications campaigns, it is useful to consider what passions people have in relation to their attitudes towards climate change. There's something going on in Canada about motorcycling and denial of climate change, something we do not see in either England or the USA. So in Canada, amongst middle-aged men, motorbikes are really a passion among the skeptics and uninvolved. 22% of this group are passionate about motorbikes, in contrast to just 2% of climate citizens. It's interesting that Marcel Coutu gets interviewed by the Canadian national press, both for his day job representing the interests of oil companies from the Canadian oil sands, and for his personal passion as a motorcycle enthusiast. Our point is not really about Mr. Coutu. It is more to understand the ethnographic type voices which speak to the motorcycling subculture in Canada. It is quite a tribal culture. This picture of a lone motorcyclist probably gives the wrong impression, as in summer you're more likely to see packs of motorcyclists riding together on the Canadian roads. Our broader point is that communication needs to be sensitive to such national, cultural and subcultural issues. Finally, communication about climate change needs to take into account the associations and emotions that people have about the subject. Much in the same way that we did for coal, as shown earlier, we also assess the associations and emotions evoked by climate change. We can see that amongst the entire sample set, around half of comments were to do with concern about climate change, a quarter were rather unemotional or unsure, and around a quarter were expressing denial or disbelief. The kinds of emotions reflected the types of thoughts that people had. There was a lot of worry amongst those who made comments about which accepted that climate change was happening, whereas those who were dismissive of it were feeling annoyed, bored, or even angry about it. Climate change evokes a great deal of passion amongst people, most of it quite negative. Communications need to address people's worries and be sensitive to other people's irritation and anger. So, could we be more positive in our low-carbon communications? Is it time to bling up climate change? So to recap, first, think of public interest in climate change as a niche. Second, companies developing low-carbon products should provide an integrated value proposition for their potential customers. Third, consider existing high-carbon attachments. Fourth, be wary not to assume that the low carbon consumer is the same for every industry sector. And finally,